Cape May is a fun beach town with gorgeous sunsets and sandy beaches. But what sets it apart from all others are the magnificent architectural treasures that the city contains, and the locals' dedication to preserving their history. Let's take a closer look. After 3 days of rain, we finally have a bright and sunny morning. It's a great day to take our bikes on the tree-lined streets to discover this historic hamlet. Just look around you. Everyone is doing it. You can pick up a free bike map that offers a very thorough, color-coded layout of the routes. The town is bike-friendly with low speed limits, bike lanes, and lots of places for you to park your bike. The terrain is pretty flat, so it's not too much of a workout. My biggest hassle today is navigating around this garbage truck. While we stop at the intersection, on my left is the beautifully restored Christopher Gallagher house. The house and gardens are meticulously maintained. The porch is gorgeous. Okay, time to get going again. We're gonna go down Jackson Street. It's one of my favorites. All this bike riding is making me hungry. I keep thinking back to dinner last night. The appetizers, the oysters. You gotta have oysters when you're here in Cape May. And of course, wine, and dessert, and then coffee. I had all that at the Virginia Hotel. Just go through those red doors on the left. This town has a lot of great porch and patio dining options. Take a look at the two cottages coming up on our left. The blue one used to be a bed and breakfast. It has 13 bedrooms and 11 bathrooms, and for a cool $750,000, it could be yours. While we enter the construction zone, let me introduce myself. I'm a friendly guy. My name is Kevin. Sometimes, my use of hand signals when I'm riding bike is confused for friendliness. I love everything French. I love French art, I love French castles, I love French water. I love French food. I love French bread with wine. I love French cheese and wine. Did I mention I love French wine? I just don't like French stairs. No two steps are the same height or the same width. Okay, we're getting out of the construction zone now, and I want to draw your attention to a cottage coming up on the right, King's Cottage. This cottage was designed by the famous architect Frank Furness. Check out the porch. Have you ever seen a ceramic balustrade before? I haven't. Wait! I want to share a little history. Set in the railings are ceramic tiles which were part of the Japanese exhibition from the Philadelphia Centennial of 1876. That was the first official World's Fair to be held in the United States. At this event, the Statue of Liberty's torch was also exhibited to the world before being taken to New York. If there's a French connection, I'll find it. You heard me call that place a cottage, and you're probably thinking, that's an awfully big cottage. Here at Cape May, cottage doesn't refer to the house's size. It means that the house was not built to be lived in all year round. It was built to be a summer residence. Once again on my right, we see the Pink House. It's known for having the fanciest porch in town. Built in 1892, it was moved to this location in the 1970s to save it from demolition. Good thing they did, because it's a favorite of photographers. It used to be here, where this motel is on my right. In the heat of summer, Cape May swells to 50,000 people. But for the rest of the year, the town has only 3,500 residents. The tiny town is chock full of Queen Anne's and Italianates and a bunch of other architectural styles from the 19th and early 20th centuries. If you're not sure of the difference, I'd love to show you around town and point out the many beautiful, quirky, and historic homes. The entire town is listed as a National Historic Landmark due to its concentration of Victorian homes. These streets are steeped in history. While we stroll among towers and turrets, we'll also learn about their historic past, with stories of wise, strong, heroic women, and the fair gentlemen who they rescued. All right, let's go! During the colonial period, whaling became prime industry. Many of the families here in the Cape are descendants of New England whaling families. Some can even trace their lineage back to the Mayflower. They migrated south to follow the whales. But whaling wouldn't last, and the next century would see growth in a new industry: tourism. At the beginning of the 1800s, the Philadelphia gentry could make the trip in 1 to 2 days by stagecoach. A long, dirty, uncomfortable ride. Others would sail down the Delaware River into the Delaware Bay. This was slightly longer, but more pleasant than travel by stagecoach. They'd hug the New Jersey coast, sailing down the bay, finally arriving at Cape May and anchoring their boats. Travelers from southern states made their way up the Atlantic seaboard by schooner, stopping in Cape May, and it soon became very popular with well-to-do Southerners. Travel to the shore became faster and easier in the 1820s with a steamboat route between Philadelphia and Cape May. The steamboat line allowed more people to travel to the shore. Though still expensive, one could expect to arrive the same day. Back then, you had to consider the time it took to travel to the shore. People often stayed for weeks or the entire summer, not returning home until the weather cooled. Cape May emerged as a premier hotspot, popular with Philadelphians and wealthy Southerners alike. Accommodation choices were quite limited in those early days, encouraging construction. I'm standing here in front of Congress Hall. This is the third Congress Hall. The one before it was destroyed by fire. This one is made in brick. Today, Congress Hall is thriving, a posh resort hotel. It has charming restaurants and dining options, and plenty of evidence harking back to its earlier decades of service. One such evidence is this hallway of flags, which showcases several of the presidents of the United States who have stayed here. While rumors that President Lincoln stayed in the hotel are not well-founded, many other presidents before and after Lincoln are known to have vacationed here. President Harrison made headlines when he chose the first floor of Congress Hall for his summer White House, as was reported by the New York Times on July 4th in 1891. Sadly, his wife, Mrs. Harrison, became increasingly ill during her last summer here in Cape May. She died 1 year later of tuberculosis. Congress Hall was first constructed in 1816 as a long wooden boarding house with no paint and no plaster. Demand for accommodations at the shore was strong in those early days, and the place filled quickly. It was added on to and improved so many times that, by 1870, this huge luxury hotel complex had all but completely replaced the original bare-bones building described from 6 decades earlier. Sadly, 8 years later, it all burned down in the Great Fire of 1878. The current version of the hotel was rebuilt in only 1 year, smaller than the one that had burned, but at least this one would last. Tourism really flourished along the New Jersey coast with the arrival of the railroad. While Atlantic City received the first boon with connection to the Camden, Philadelphia area in 1854, it took almost another decade, until 1863, for Cape May to be connected by rail. Reasonable train fares and shorter travel time made it possible for regular folks to enjoy a beach holiday and return to their homes and to their jobs. This finally made the beach a destination for more than just an affluent few. Shortly after the arrival of the railroad, the city suffered two devastating fires. In August of 1869, a fire destroyed the post office and at least 35 other buildings. But then, in 1878, a 5-day-long fire destroyed 30 blocks of the town center. This meant that a large number of houses and other buildings were rebuilt in this period. Because of this, thanks to this, the town is a unique collection of homes, largely from the second half of the 19th century, during the height of the Victorian era. Cape May is one of the only East Coast seaside towns to have such a large collection of homes from this period. It merits noting that the Victorian era is a period of time, but not really a style in itself. The epoch represents 7 decades that span when Queen Victoria was on the throne of England, plus a couple more years thrown in at the end for good measure. When Victoria came to the throne in 1837, Great Britain was climbing to the heights of its power and influence in the world. No one could have known at that time that this young woman of only 18 years would remain on the throne until the next century, longer than any other British monarch before her. Despite the fact that she died in 1901, the Victorian era is often extended to 1913 to include all the years up to the First World War in 1914. Although we refer to this time period as the Victorian era, that's only a label that we've put on this period as it drifts into history, and we try to cram all the events and stuff of a generation that lived prior to World War I into a neat, manageable little box. I want to show you an interesting book. It's currently being sold under the title of Sloane's Victorian Buildings. That's a name that would have meant nothing to its readers in the 1800s. The book was first published in nearby Philadelphia in 1852 by self-proclaimed architect Samuel Sloane, entitled The Model Architect. Through this title and through these pages, Samuel Sloane was attempting to promote himself and his ideas for what he felt the ideal architecture should be for the growing American nation. He'd seen enough of the uniform classical revival and federalist styles, and his publishers were eager to see something new. I want to show you this. Sloane designed a modern villa in the Italian style, and he titled it the Southern Mansion. Look at this version of the house with 5 windows across the front on the second floor. He also drew a version with a slightly more modest 3 windows across the front, but added this wing onto the side. And behind me is the southern mansion. And I think you'd have to say it's the exact same manor that's in the book by Samuel Sloan. Today, it is a famous Cape May bed and breakfast, which proudly proclaims in their publicity that, in 1863, the Philadelphia industrialist George Allen built an American villa of bracket, post, and beam on the island of Cape May, designed by the internationally acclaimed architect Sam Sloan. Obviously, Mr. Allen was the dream client for Samuel Sloan. Mr. Allen wanted the big version with 5 windows across the front of the mansion. The side extension came along a few years later. Really, this book only contains about half of the styles that would be popularized during the period that would eventually be called the Victorian Era. Some of the styles had yet to be invented, or more accurately stated, to evolve. And although we might think of the Victorian era and think styles were all the same, styles changed considerably through the era. Take, for example, Western fashion. You could say that in the Victorian era, all women's fashion was all the same and that they all wore long dresses. Well, I guess that's true. Wait, are those dresses getting even puffier? How's she gonna fit through a door? Oh, now they're getting reasonable again. But wait, are they turning into chickens? Wow! Check out the arms on those women. They must really work out. Oh, okay. Things are getting sleek. Quite minimalistic. Nice. I think you see my point. Yes, all the skirts were long through all those years, but there was quite a bit of change in style. The same can be said for architecture from this period. There are some traits that are common among many of the building styles from the era. However, you can also notice styles changing and evolving through the era. It's helpful to know that in the 1800s, the United States was a young and sparsely populated country. When the Europeans first arrived, the eastern half was practically covered in forest. This meant in those early days wood was plentiful and cheap. Also, it was the age of machines, and some of those machines made working with wood and making decorative ornamentation in wood easier than ever before, like child's play. First up, we're going to look at Italianate, or Italian villa architecture. Some of the chief characteristics are low-pitched roofs, wide eaves, corbels or brackets, square towers or cupolas, and chamfered columns for porches. Behind me is the Hotel Chalfont. This is an example of classic Italianate or Italian villa style architecture. And often in the United States, we added decorations in wood. The idea behind the style is that it was reminiscent of the luxurious villas of central and southern Italy. The villas of this region of Italy didn't see a lot of snow, so there was no need for a steep roof pitch like in the Swiss Alps. So a defining feature of this style is a low-pitched, nearly flat roof. You can see that here. The space where the roof overhangs the wall is called the eaves. Eaves are usually large on Italian villas. Here we can see a generous overhang on this roof. And finally, underneath that generous overhang, we see both corbels and brackets. Corbels and brackets are pieces that protrude from a wall and are designed to support the weight of the roof edge or porch. Because the corbels often have a functional purpose, they are often thicker and heftier than brackets. Despite their dissimilar portions, both corbels and brackets do serve the purpose of supporting loads and providing ornamentation. Next, let's look at the very top. Notice the square tower rising out of the top of the roof? That's called a cupola. Cupolas are a frequent feature of Italianate style, but they are not a defining one. Italianate window sashes typically had 1/1 or 2/2 glazing. Window trim had exuberant variations. For example, U-shaped crowns with brackets or pedimented crowns with decorated hoods. Arched and curved windows were popularized in America by the Italianate trend. We see a few of those arch-shaped windows here. If the house had a porch, usually chamfered columns were used. After a century and a half, this venue still holds a lot of charm. I love the huge porches and the fact that we can have breakfast and dinner outside under their protection from the sun and the other elements. While we were here, there was even a wedding. Some people would disparagingly call buildings with abundant gingerbread scrollwork steamboat architecture. I love how the Chalfont embraces its look. I wouldn't change a thing. The story behind who built this hotel is fascinating. Henry Sawyer was an officer in the 1st Regiment of Cavalry, New Jersey Volunteers, and his Civil War record is quite impressive. On a reconnaissance mission, he was shot in the stomach. He received 2 serious wounds in his thigh and his cheek at the Battle of Brandy Station before his horse was killed, throwing him out of the saddle and knocking him out. Captured by Confederates, he ended up in a Confederate prison. Sawyer's name was one of 2 drawn in a lottery to determine who would be executed in retaliation for previous Union executions of 2 Confederate officers. The Union would be the states from the North, and the Confederacy would be made of the Southern states during the United States Civil War. Sawyer's wife's personal plea to President Abraham Lincoln ultimately won him a stay of execution. The Union then arranged an exchange for 2 Confederate prisoners they had captured. One of those 2 exchanged prisoners was William Henry Fitzhugh Lee, or Rooney, as he was called when he posed for this photo with his dad, who was none other than the Confederate General Robert E. Lee. Next up, we're going to review Gothic Revival. Common characteristics of Gothic Revival are pointed arches, steep roofs, verge board, and stick finials. Gothic era motifs like trefoils and quatrefoils, cusps, arches, and lobes, and church-like towers. According to the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission website, the most commonly identifiable feature of the Gothic Revival style is the pointed arch, used for windows, doors, and decorative elements like porches, dormers, and roof gables. Other characteristic details include steeply pitched roofs and front-facing gables with delicate wooden trim called verge board or barge boards. This distinctive incised wooden trim is often referred to as gingerbread, and is the feature most associated with this style. Gothic Revival style buildings often have porches with decorative turnposts or slender columns with flattened arches or side brackets connecting the posts. This cottage really fits the bill as an example of Gothic Revival architecture. It even has a church-like tower to boot and with a quatrefoil window. It was built for State Senator John McCreary at the whopping cost of $20,000 in 1870. McCreary was a Scottish immigrant who made his fortune in coal. He, like many wealthy Philadelphians, chose to summer in Cape May. Cape May hotel developers wanted nice-looking upscale cottages near their resorts. By the late 1800s, Gothic Revival was not the latest style, but this house was so well executed that developers were delighted to have it so close to their hotels. McCreary's villa was truly elegant, unlike other Cape May homes packed close together to make the most of valuable real estate. This house was set back from the street. This depiction from the 1890s showcases the house with the newly built cottages on Columbia Avenue. The house was still largely intact as of 100 years later in the 1980s. However, it had lost its tower's iron cresting and the surrounding picket fence.
It takes a lot of work to restore and repair the fence that is around the house. Practically all the fences of the 19th century were lost.
Unlike porches, which have the advantage of having a roof to protect them, the wooden fences of this period had to stand up to the elements on their own. Most of them have been completely lost over time. Picket fences are my passion, and I even wrote a book about them. I think this design is so attractive, I added it when I updated my book for its second edition. If you want to make a cutout of this picket for your own fence, I include the full pattern in my book. While we're here at the Abbey on Gurney Street, we're going to take a few steps toward the ocean to check out the neighborhood.
I'm here in front of the Stockton cottages, and it gives me a feeling like I've been here before. Yet somehow I know that's impossible.
This row of fanciful sister cottages all are very similar to each other, but they do have slight differences in appearance, with some minor changes to porch types and trims. They have a set of cousins in San Francisco, or so I'm told. Here in the United States, the Second Empire style always had a mansard roof. After that, many of its other characteristics were the same as the Italianates, including wide eaves, corbels, towers or cupolas, and chamfered columns.
I got up really early this morning to help avoid some of the noise of the city and show you some of its beautiful houses. We're here before the Queen Victoria, but it would be better named the Napoleon III.
The Second Empire was a period, so I could criticize using its name as the name of a style. But it was a much shorter period than the Victorian era. It lasted from 1852 to 1870 under Emperor Napoleon. Not that Napoleon. That one. Under the rule of Emperor Napoleon III, The original empire, or First Empire, was under Napoleon I. So what happened to Napoleon II? Napoleon III wanted to make a complete overhaul of Paris, and he did. The new look has been a big success, and it's the look that we think of as the quintessential Paris. It was done under his rule. The essential characteristic of the style in America was the mansard roof, as popularized by architect Francois Mansart. He did his work during the reigns of Louis XIII and Louis XIV. The mansard roof is a type of roof having two slopes on every side, the lower slope being considerably steeper than the upper. The advantage of the mansard roof is that it allows a full floor of living space above the cornice line of a building, without increasing the number of stories in the structure. Francois Mansart promoted the mansard roof in his designs of the 17th century, and his influence can be seen in French architecture ever since. It was extensively used in the buildings of Paris constructed during the Second Empire period in the 19th century. Beneath their rooflines, Second Empire American homes had much in common with the Italianates. Things such as stylistic use of overhanging eaves with decorative brackets and ornate and often curved door and window trims. In stick-style architecture, you'll find a timbered look, showing open stickwork with square bays, steeply pitched roofs, things that will generate an angular or vertical emphasis. The stick style favored displaying an overlaid half-timbered effect, with boards attached to the exterior wall in grids. Grids intended to be suggestive of the underlying frame construction. Other characteristic features included attached open stickwork verandas. The word veranda and porch can be used interchangeably, but usually veranda is used if the porch is very large and extends the entire side of the building or even wraps around it. My French friend says that we shouldn't call it a veranda if it isn't enclosed in glass or has the option to be enclosed in glass. In French, there means glass, and a veranda is a porch enclosed in glass. Well, my French friends, you shouldn't call this shampooing. It's just shampoo. Shampooing is a verb. Shampooing. Shampoo. Shampooing. Shampoo. Stick-style buildings often featured projecting square bays, steeply pitched roofs, and overhanging eaves. Angular and vertical elements were emphasized. Though associated with Carpenter Gothic, the stick style made less use of gingerbread. It favored simpler curves and circular shapes. The 18-room mansion here at the Emlyn Physic Estate on Washington Street was designed by architect Frank Furness and is open for tours. Built in 1879, it is one of the finest examples of Victorian stick-style architecture in America. The estate was designed for Dr. Emlyn Physic, descendant of a wealthy and famous Philadelphia family. Physic's grandfather, Dr. Philip Singh Physic, was known as the father of American surgery. Emlyn himself did not follow in the family tradition. He never practiced medicine, opting instead to live the life of a country gentleman here in his home. Even the home's furnishings show the simpler geometric and circular shapes that were favored in stick style over the more elaborate gingerbread of the Gothic Revival. The exterior of the mansion is distinguished by the architect's trademark oversized features, including upside-down chimneys and the huge stick-like brackets on the porch and hooded jerkin head dormers. Now you're probably wondering, what the heck is a jerkin head dormer? Jerkin head describes a roof that is a combination of two or more common roof styles. The gable roof, a simple pointed roof that comes up from two sides, and the hip roof, a roof that comes up from all sides. The jerkin head dormer starts out at the bottom, coming up toward the top like a gable dormer, but then, somewhere on the journey upward, gets joined by another roof line that slopes inward as it also goes up. Finally, we're going to look at Queen Anne style. It's usually asymmetrical, with the front door off to one side. It often features towers. They could be round, square, or polygonal. Multiple wall textures are often used, and it can borrow from any of the prior Victorian styles.
And here at the Judson Bennett house, we found a typical Queen Anne.
The distinctive features of Queen Anne style almost always include an asymmetrical facade. Others include a dominant front-facing gable, like we see here. Towers could be any shape, and here we see an octagonal turret. The main door was usually off to one side. Differing wall textures, such as patterned wood shingles shaped into varying designs, were often used. Here we have fish scales and two sizes of lap siding. Dentils, columns, spindle and bracket work, painted balustrades, and gingerbread motifs were all common. Really, anything from any of the prior styles. Queen Anne is the last style strongly associated with the Victorian era, and would largely stop being constructed after the 1920s. Other styles that emerged after the Queen Anne would maintain their popularity deeper into the 20th century and were not often thought of as Victorian styles. And now for a few fun historical and architectural facts that just didn't fit anywhere else. Harriet Tubman was a former slave who helped other enslaved people find freedom. Harriet lived in Cape May in the early 1850s, working to fund her underground railroad to freedom. Harriet, like so many others, worked in hotels and houses to earn money for her cause during the tourist season. Things were not always convivial at Cape May, where Southern slaveholders and Philadelphia abolitionists were all converging during the summer. Sometimes there were tense relations between free black hotel workers and slave-owning vacationers. When the summer season ended, Harriet would switch hats to become an Underground Railroad conductor. One account tells of the fall of 1852 when Harriet crossed the Delaware Bay to rescue 9 refugees. She then escorted them to Canada and freedom. Here at the corner of Lafayette and Franklin Streets, a new museum is under works to commemorate Harriet's struggles and hard work and that of other enslaved people.
So it's decided to rain today, but we're going to take advantage of this time. Since I can't go to the beach, I'm going to show you some of the beautiful streets here in Cape May. I'm here in front of the Jacob Lemming house, and it's said on the tour of the town that he purchased this house for $1,800. But to get a tax break, that required the house to cost $2,000. He purchased an extra $200 worth of gingerbread trim for the house. You can even find French houses and gardens. And the streets are filled with small, pretty houses with pretty gardens in front of them. When bathrooms arrived here in Cape May, people decided it would be better to add them on to the outside of the house. So many of the bathrooms look like this.
There was little concern for the pipes freezing in the walls, because these were only summer cottages. The pipes would be drained every fall.
I hope that you have liked our course in the architecture of Cape May, but when you're at the beach, you've got to go to the beach. See you later.
Porches were important living spaces in 19th century America. Big or small, all the houses here in Cape May have them. We'll take a look at a few while I thank the people and groups that helped make this video possible. You hung around to the end. I guess you fell in love with Cape May too.
On the way to Cape May, I fell in love with you. On the way to Cape May, I saw my dreams come true.
You looked so very pretty when we met in Ocean City, like someone oh so easy to adore. I sang this little ditty on our way through Ocean City, heading south along the Jersey shore. On the way to Cape May, I fell in love with you. On the way to Cape May, I saw my dreams come true. I was taken by your smile as we drifted by sea. My heart was gone when we reached Avalon. On the way to Cape May,